One thing first, though, actually. Football's equivalent of David Dickinson, the BBC's Ramona-in-Chief, rampant left-winger, pun intended, Gary Lineker has officially broken BBC impartiality guidelines.
Straight back into it with the Daily Mail. The BBC has been accused of infusing its TV shows with a left-wing bias. Who'd have thought that, Steve?
The BBC is well and truly one of the most woke organisations in the UK.
I think the BBC has shown its bias Brexit, with the Boris bashing, the trans issues. I don't think the BBC understands how to resonate with the whole of the UK and the population. I think they're run by woke people. I think they're out of touch.
Earlier this month, Gary Lineker caused mass hysteria over his comments on Twitter that likened the language used by Suella Braverman and the new Small Boats Bill as similar to that of 1930s Germany.
There are very clever historians, eminent people, who have said he was right. The language of the 1930s became about othering, talking about picking on a group in society and giving them a kind of disproportionate agency in the problems that working men and women faced.
Despite being a comment that was widely backed up by historians, the media went into a frenzy, and suddenly the BBC's impartiality was once again thrown into question. The calls for the abolition of the licence fee were louder than ever. But what's going on here? Is the Beeb really that left-wing? First of all, it's worth mentioning that a false narrative was peddled. That Gary was comparing what this government was doing to the Holocaust. That's not what he said. This is clearly a straw man and should immediately send alarm bells ringing. But let's take a look at what other BBC pundits have done in their own time. Alan Sugar, another hugely popular face of the BBC, showed his Photoshop skills when he posted this picture of Jeremy Corbyn sitting next to the Führer. He even tweeted, "Don't vote Labour," on the day right before the election. How's that for impartiality? Or what about Jeremy Clarkson? He's constantly bashing the left and has too many anti-woke moments to even get started with. But who the hell cares? None of these people are political pundits. Someone who is a political commentator, though, is a certain Andrew Neil. Andrew is a Thatcherite and proudly right-leaning. He was the former Sunday Times editor and even worked on GB News for a stint before realising just how batshit they were. But even this isn't enough to satiate the far right. Why? Because the BBC is the enemy. The kingmaker, Rupert Murdoch, has been at war with the BBC since his venture into broadcasting in the 1980s. He literally decides who the next Prime Minister of the country is going to be. That's the kind of power this Bond villain has. And he sees the BBC as his competition. Their centrist-ish narrative offers a context by which the right-wing media are viewed. If the BBC are centre, then it makes the right seem like wackos. So, what's the game plan? How is this war being waged? First of all, paint the BBC as far left. That immediately helps to position themselves as more reasonable. Whilst manoeuvring their optics left, place people who have the best interest of the right in their hierarchy, thus skewing their politics right. Like the chairman Richard Sharp, who donated £500,000 to the Tory party and helped arrange Boris Johnson's infamous £800,000 loan. Or Robbie Gibb, who sits on the BBC board and was Theresa May's communications director. Even the Director General, Tim Davie, used to be the chairman for the Hammersmith and Fulham Tory party and even stood in elections. This has a few upshots. Not only do people start to associate normally centrist right views as being far left, but also other outfits and people that were reasonably left before now look like damn crazy commies. Then, any opportunity that comes up, seize on it as a chance to push the anti-BBC agenda and turn the public against them. Just like you saw with Lineker.
Now, I'd actually go one step further and completely defund the whole operation, as you know. But
the thought of the BBC being privatised and being able to buy it himself gets the kingmaker hard. A feeling he probably hasn't felt in a pretty long time. Imagine that, Murdoch, in one fell swoop, is the de facto czar of the British press. As the kingmaker himself once said, a monopoly is a terrible thing, until you get one.